Right guys, welcome to our video. Today we're going to do game week 11 predictions for the Premier League, and I'm joined with a guest for the first time today, so welcome Andre. He's my friend from Italy, sports into Milan.
Hi guys, how you doing? I'm Andrew and I'm really proud to be on Gordon's channel. Let's go with the score predictions.
But in terms of English teams, he supports Chelsea as well, so I'm glad to have my predictions today. So we would have started with Newcastle versus Aston Villa, but the game's been postponed due to coronavirus concerns, so it doesn't really matter anyway. But in terms of what I've seen from both teams, I would have gone for something like a 1-0 Villa win. But we move on to the first game, which is actually going to be played, which is Burnley versus Everton. Now, Burnley back at home, and last time they played there, they got their first win of the season. But after that match, they lost to City 5-0, where in fairness they had a few injuries, so they missed out on big players like Pope, Bardsley and Brownhill. So those are all due to be back on the game against Everton. For Everton, on the other hand, though, they've lost 4 of the last 5 games, which is a very worrying stat. I think a lot of it's down to depth. I mean, they've brought a lot of good players in the summer, but it was the first 11 problems that need to be addressed. But since they spent so much money, they didn't really have much to spend on the squad as well. Starting to show when injuries and suspensions are kicking in, as we saw when Richarlison was suspended as well. But there's also one other player who's still not playing, who was essential to them for many years now, which is Coleman. Now, he's the main player who hasn't featured since they were top of the league and were actually unbeaten. And I think the fact that they just haven't found a replacement at right back showed why they've had to change formations to have Iwobi at right wing back or Godfrey at right back, and nothing's really seemed to work for them so far. I think they're just going to have to hope he comes back sooner rather than later, or they just manage to adjust to the current shape or playing without him. Well, they're saying that they're missing Coleman. They've still got a very good front line, and I'm sure they'll find the combination of who should play either right back or right wing back at some point, which is why I'm going for an Everton win. I'm going to say 2-1 Everton. And I also think Richarlison's going to score in this one as well. Andre, what do you think?
Burnley is not playing very good at the moment, but I think they've got a decent manager. Everton was a nice team. I think they are playing quite good at the moment. Also, they've got a nice manager. Carlo Ancelotti is one of the best managers, I think, in the world. This game will be 2-0 Everton for sure.
Now, in my opinion, City have still had a poor start. I don't really think you can sort of cover those scars from a 5-0 triumph against Burnley. They play another relegated threatened team though in Fulham this week, so they've had 2 lucky games in that sense. And to say that City will be licking their lips is an understatement. Now, Fulham, in terms of their team, they're actually quite decent going forward. I think Lookman's been an incredible player for them, and although he's getting the criticism for the penalty, he hasn't really fazed him. You know, he scored against Leicester, and I think when I saw him play against us, he looked very good as well. But of course, that attack doesn't really have much even on City's defence, although it is quite vulnerable still, and their defence is just where their problems lie, and to have that bad a defence away at Man City is going to ask a lot of problems for them, and I think that's just going to be the telling factor. Of course, they did manage to beat a Leicester City team away though, who were very good up front as well, so you never know, but I think that's a step very too far, and that's why I'm going to go for a 3-1 City win. And also, we're going to do another one. I think De Bruyne's going to score in this one.
Fulham is currently 17th in the league. They've got a nice player like Alexander Mitrovic. I really like Phil Foden and obviously Kevin De Bruyne. You know, I reckon that Manchester City will win this game, maybe 3-0.
So West Ham, Man United. Now, West Ham had a great start to the season. I think they're finally starting to show the quality their players possess. I mentioned when they played us, I think Souček's a good player. I mean, there's a lot of good players in the team, which goes without saying when you're that high up in the table, but I think Fornals is another decent one, and I think if they get anything out of this game, he's going to be one who's going to have a decent game. Now, this is just after the game where Man United have lost to PSG. I mean, I think to start with, I know this is an obvious thing, but for Man United, I think their first problem is they have 3 incredible midfielders, but because they're all attacking midfielders, they can't fit them in a formation, so they're always having 1 playing and 2 on the bench, so it's obviously going to be a problem. I think, you know, the Fred and McTominay thing seems to work because they're quite defensively sound, not disciplined as Fred showed in that PSG game. I think there are a few poor signs for Man United in that PSG game, and I think that's why they're not going to retain their 100% record away from home, where they were lucky to just about keep it last time out, and that's why I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw this time.
West Ham is currently 5th in the league. They are playing quite good football and quite good season by the way this year, but they definitely need to score more goals. Man United is playing quite good football at the moment. I think everybody knows that Cavani is a massive player. This game will be a draw, 2-2.
I think Chelsea's biggest question going into this game is whether Giroud will start. I mean, to score 4 goals against last year's Europa League winners, if he doesn't get a start in this game, he's never going to start, is he? So you do feel for the lad if he doesn't, but you know, it just shows they're having good problems, and when you're playing well, that's what you have, and I think Lampard will be very happy with that. They of course haven't got any injuries, the keeper's coming and he's gelled brilliantly, so they are really early signs of maybe contention for winning the league at this stage, but they've got to win these games. If they don't and they get a draw from it or a defeat, then it shows that they're not ready for it, because these are the sort of games you need to grind out. And coming up against a Leeds team, which are very tricky opponents, and they do love an upset away from home, so I don't be surprised if they got anything out of it. But I think Chelsea's class will show, and that's why I'm going to go for a 2-0 win.
And what can I say about Leeds United? They are 12th in the table right now. They are playing such a good football thanks to their manager, thanks to their players because they are amazing. And obviously Chelsea, my team, and I've been supporting Chelsea for 6 years. This team is quite good. I really like it. We've got young players, Reece James, Mason Mount, I really like him, Kai Havertz, also Timo Werner, Ziyech. We need to improve ourselves against big teams. We miss just a little bit of experience. I think that we can fight this year for the title. Chelsea 2, Leeds United 1.
West Brom Crystal Palace. Now West Brom last time out beat us and left us bottom of the table, and they moved up it. They're still in the bottom three now because of Fulham's win though. They also before that played Man United and they had a decent game in there. I think they were unlucky, things just didn't go their way. Playing against a Palace team who have lost 3 of the last 5 games, but interestingly enough, the 2 that they won, and they were against the other 2 teams which came up this season, was a 4-1 win against Leeds, and they beat Fulham as well. Now they're going to complete the hat-trick now and get a win against West Brom. I don't think it's unlikely. Zaha's also in strong contention to come back after completing his 2 weeks of quarantine after getting the coronavirus, so it's a big player for West Brom to try and keep quiet, and I don't think they'll be able to do that with their shaky defence. Which is why I'm going to go for a 2-1 Crystal Palace win.
West Brom is currently 18th in the table. They're not playing very good football. They did a nice win against Sheffield United. Palace, what can I say about Palace? It's quite a good team. I reckon this game will finish 2-1 for Crystal Palace.
Sheffield United versus Leicester City. Wow, where do I start? I mean, there were good signs against West Brom, but I think the problem I have is that although we made chances, it's a very poor team and second worst team in the division, to be honest with you, from what I've seen of everyone so far. Very poor defence as well, which showed against us. And like I said, my concern is that if we can create as much chances against West Brom, which is an encouraging sign, it doesn't seem like it's going to be like that for the rest of the season with other teams that aren't in the bottom 3. I mean, if you look at the game against Fulham where we played, it's pretty similar signs in terms of when we played Fulham, we created a lot of chances, we didn't take them. We got a goal because we got a penalty. So I think that's going to be our problem, that people say we're not converting the chances, and I've seen some stats saying that, we've created more chances than Chelsea and Man City, but I really take that with a pinch of salt because I think it's just the fact that we had so many chances in that West Brom game that it just spiraled us up the chance meter in the division. And I think if you'd seen the chances we'd created before and after West Brom game, the difference would be incomparable, and I think we probably would have been lower bottom table at the very least, if not in the bottom 3, because from what I've seen of us, we do absolutely nothing in terms of creativity on the pitch any other game. So I do kind of sympathise with people like Burnley where they're suddenly be giving a whole load of chances after being starved of them for the rest of the season. But although I've been defending him, I do think he's just got to stop playing for a bit because his confidence is so low. And I think if he was in contention to start playing, he should have taken that chance because it was a big chance. And I just don't think we can rely on someone to miss those sort of chances when the games are so important for us coming thick and fast in December as well. But enough rambling about my team, on to Leicester City. Now they've actually had 2 defeats in a row now. Now it starts to look even a little worse than that for Leicester if you're looking at all competitions. In the last 5 games, they've only won once, and that was against Wolves back on the 8th of November. So they're coming up to a month since they won their last game. Pretty concerning, but they were against Liverpool, and then the concerning one was against Fulham. When you're around those sort of places, you have freak results. I mean, I only watched the highlights, but they looked very poor defensively for the first goal. Lookman had so much space and time and just slotted it away nicely. So defensively, they are concerned, and they do have quite an inexperienced defence. I mean, Thomas actually made his debut against us last season and has done pretty well since. He's playing consecutive football. And Justin made his debut last season as well. So they're both debutants, and if they start to perform, then it shows how good their academy is. But for now, while they're inexperienced, it could be something we could try and exploit. Trying to replace Chilwell and Pereira for them, who were very good players from last season, is a big boots to fill. And I think that's why they've had to change formation to try and get a bit more solidarity defensively. But that's looking at it in a very positive perspective, and I think being realistic, sadly for the first time this season, I'm going to go against my team and I'm going to say we're going to actually lose 1-0.
Sorry Godza, but I reckon Leicester 2, Sheffield United 0.
Spurs versus Arsenal. Now Spurs, once again, I've only done this 3 times, and each time I think they've been the biggest game of the week. Now, it's obviously a North London derby, so we should be in for a good game. There only really tends to be 1 goal in it if one team does win or lose. If it's a draw, obviously it's going to be no goals between it. Now, last time out, Spurs played against Chelsea away. I think out of the 2 teams, they'd been happy with the result. There wasn't really many chances in the game, and Spurs had one if they'd released the ball easier and quicker in the final third towards the end, could have got something very late out of it. But I think Chelsea had the bigger chances, and they were just lucky Abraham didn't have his shooting boots on. I think if they win this, though, Spurs, North London will definitely have the bragging rights to Spurs, doing the double in 2020, and of course, be top of the league as well. Now, one thing is, Bale hasn't really featured at all. I think he's been playing the Europa League, League, but in terms of the actual league, he's barely had a sniff. He scored a winner against Brighton, but could this be the sort of game where with 20 minutes to go and there's nothing between the teams to bring on and try and break the deadlock? I think he's got that ability, of course. Showed it for Real Madrid when they played Liverpool in the Champions League final, so I'm sure he's still got it in his locker. As for Arsenal, of course, they only started the league against Fulham with a 3-0 win, but they were in serious contention for Champions League places. You know, they finished with an FA Cup win. They brought in Willian and Gabriel, the defender, so there were a lot of good signings and party as well at the end of the transfer window. So, you know, they were good additions to the squad, but even though the additions have done well, it still hasn't really looked anything like they should this season under the expectations of last season for Arsenal. They lost to Wolves last time out, and that started asking a lot of the questions of pundits, and the famous quote from Roy Keane saying how they'll be comfortable staying up in the division. And for Arsenal fans, could that sadly be the season they're going to have, where they're not even going to make Europa League football and just going to have a mediocre Premier League season? I don't think they will. They do tend to turn things around after Christmas, but I do think that Arteta's got a big job in his hands. It's not just about getting them up the division, he's also got to sort out a lot of attitude problems, and I think that's going to be his biggest problem and who he has to get rid of in that process. And it could be a long process trying to get rid of those players. But if either team wins, there always tends to be one goal between it, so I'm going to go for a 2-1 Tottenham win.
I don't really like Arteta as a manager, and I think that players don't believe in what Arteta says. I reckon 2-1 Tottenham.
Liverpool versus Wolves. Now, Liverpool had a decent season. Liverpool still in the top 4 places and still in contention for winning the league. Their defensive depth has been massively lacking this season due to injuries in all departments of the 4. Now, of course, they're unlucky to get a draw against Brighton late on. It was a very harsh penalty, and considering how 10 minutes earlier they were 2-0 up to then get it wiped off the VAR, it was definitely a bitter pill for Klopp to swallow, which he showed in his press conference afterwards. But on the other hand, they were lucky to get a win against Ajax. I think it'll be interesting to see who plays in goal, and I know Alisson's got a hamstring injury, so he's unlikely to feature for this one. So considering how Keller played in the Champions League midweek and kept a clean sheet and made 2 decent saves, got nothing to prove why he shouldn't play in this one. And Adrian's had obviously a terrible spell at Liverpool, so I don't really think he's going to be going back into the team after not being in it in the Champions League anyway. Wolves got a win last time out, and in the process Jimenez got a really nasty head injury. It looks like he actually fractured his skull, so I hope he comes back soon and fit and healthy, and my thoughts are with him. While without him, maybe it could be a chance to change the system, because they've, ever since Adama Traore's hot form, have had to go to 3 up front most games from what I've noticed, and it leaves them exposed in midfield, of course, because you've got one less midfielder now, and you're playing with more width, which is good going forward, of course. And maybe they could start looking at playing Traore up front with, say, somebody like Podence. I don't really know their team too well, in all honesty. Playing against Liverpool team, which are very offensive, you probably need a bit more defensive balance in the team, so to have 2 up front makes more sense. It's how they beat City last season as well, where Traore started as the right wing back but then went up front and then got the 2 goals. I think this is a very interesting game, and I did say recently I thought Wolves could be doing better this season, but getting win against Arsenal is definitely a right step in the right direction. Could they get something like this game? I think they will, considering how Liverpool, it's quite hard for them to maintain this with the poor defence they have compared to what they're used to, so I think it's going to go to 1-1 draw.
2-2 is a fair result for both teams.
Last game of the week now, Brighton versus Southampton. Brighton, like we just mentioned in the previous game, got a nice and unexpected point in the last game against Liverpool. I think with Welbeck on the pitch, they do look a lot better team. He looks very hungry, and I think he's trying to prove people wrong that he's still got it as a footballer. And although they have issues in their goalkeeping department, defensively they look very sound. I mean, they've always been known over the years to have decent defenders. You know, you've got Dunk, you had Duffy, who's now gone on loan to Celtic, got Ben White now as well, Webster. You know, there's a lot of decent defenders, so I think clean sheets are something they've got to try and start looking at now, because I think as long as they can get the confidence up, whoever plays in goal, it could be something they could start to grind out 1-0 wins to keep them up. I think they'll be comfortable this season even without that. Southampton start the season great, of course. The last 2 games though, they had a draw and a defeat, so they'll be looking to try and regain some form. Of course, without Danny Ings, they've been without him for a few weeks, and I think they'll be out with him for a month overall. However, the last time out was a 3-2 defeat to Man United, where they were 2-0 up in the game, and then they lost their lead in the second half, and a last minute winner by Man United meant, like I mentioned, they kept the 100% away record. But I think this time out they're going to keep their 2-goal lead. I'm going to go 2-0 Southampton.
And I reckon that Southampton will win this match 2-0.
Right, that draws the end of the video, guys. Thank you, Andre, for being my guest.
I'm really sorry if my English is not very good. Try to do my best. I love Chelsea and I love English football.
Let me know how you think your teams will do and if my predictions are accurate or not, and I hope your teams do well on the weekend, guys. All the best. Out the Blades. Till next time.